I want to talk a little about the unconscious. Now, the concept has probably been ridiculed in psychology circles, especially psychoanalysis, which is all about how our unconscious, our primitive instincts and drives determine so much of our behaviour. Now, you've heard probably and had a laugh of, say, Freud's theories like penis envy and the Oedipal complex, but those theories related to the unconscious are making a comeback. But it's happening through human resources departments and into the workplace. The idea of unconscious bias comes from American social psychology departments almost 20 years ago. It's basically a therapy-sounding term for prejudice. Its focus was automatic negative judgments made against blacks. Well-known studies include the greater difficulty that resumes with ethnic-sounding names had in securing interviews. Programs teaching it to workers have swept the corporate world, making it an $8 billion industry in America. Anti-discrimination campaigners like it. They can replace the emotional language of racism or sexism with the cooler, business-friendly rhetoric for valuing workplace diversity. But I hate to break it, the theory is mostly wrong, particularly when it comes to predicting behaviour. Professor Philip Tetlock of the famed Wharton Business School says of this theory that there's never been a more psychological construct that's been so popular, yet so misunderstood and lacking in psychological payoff. The Australian government has a behavioural economics team that applied the resume test with public sector workers this year. Guess the bias they found? It was the exact opposite to what the theory of unconscious bias teaches. Instead of favouring white males, the workers favoured minority groups and females. Even the test's creators, psychologists Banerjee and Greenwald, admit that its findings haven't even been validated properly before it caught fire in the public and in the workplace. This theory is a great example of questionable science being elevated as sacred because its findings are politically attractive. It's intuitively satisfying and a way for corporate leaders to signal that they're serious about redressing inequalities. It's also difficult to argue against something we're told we're not even aware of. The CEO of JB Ware Australia, Justin Greiner, said unconscious bias was a reason to bring in more quotas to ensure there were more women in finance, for example. Lawyers' representatives in Australia gave the issue front cover status in a recent journal to its members, telling the country's lawyers that it was the main reason for the poor representation of women and ethnic groups at the top of the best law firms. Look, these initiatives are good intentioned. It makes sense that countries like Australia or Canada, with their skilled, English-speaking and multicultural workforce, have advantages in the global economy, especially in engaging with the Asia-Pacific, for example. No doubt more can be done in representing women and minority groups at senior levels. But promoting unconscious bias with a religious fervour is misguided and misses some of its more sinister undercurrents. The idea is rooted in assumptions that a lack of ethnic or gender representation at all organisational levels is caused by institutional discrimination. That a person's group membership determines their outlook, and that current measures of merit are made by and for white males. It sees us all as automatons to unseen power structures and undermines the application of reason in decision-making. It's anti-Western in many respects because the theories are a veiled form of contempt for the individual. But this is not easy. It's not easy speaking out about ideas that carry a feel-good quality. Just ask the fired Google executive, James Damore, who dared to suggest the possibility of biological differences between the sexes being a factor in technical aptitudes for computing. What sustains movements around diversity and programs related to race and gender are what economist Timur Kanan calls preference falsification. This refers to the social pressure that's applied to have people publicly praise ideas which they privately disagree with. Underground resentment will grow when seen in combination with trends of, say, concept creep, which is about how the definition of terms like prejudice, abuse, or violence keep getting diluted A good example in Australia is the growth of terms like casual racism or casual sexism, the measures of which are pretty weak. The risk is a greater hypersensitivity in the workplace, intense linguistic policing, and accusations of your inappropriate behaviour becoming a growing weapon against rivals. I do think we can better incorporate mass psychology and the irrational into how we think about human behaviour. But while there are structural and cultural barriers influencing inequality, the answers don't lie in our unconscious. If you like this video, please subscribe to Rebel Media.